snow.
Yeah, it looks a lot more like March, doesn't it?
Good skiing.
Right? Finally. Did you have like one good weekend down there? Isn't it?
I've been to Alyeska twice this year, which is far less than normal.
Nice.
Well, I went on Military Monday in February,
Yep.
and that was actually a really good day.
Nice.
And then I did the Santa Ski Day in December. That one, they had like 3 runs of it. That was pretty bad. I think I might check out Hilltop or something this Friday. The snow stays, which who knows at this point. Right?
I'm not awake yet, so I make mistakes. Like this. Let's not do that. This way. I had that empty before I left my house. Look at all that stuff. There you go. So I wanted to point out that this weekend, coming up, March 21st, which I believe is Friday, yes, our annual undergraduate philosophy conference begins. We have 2 invited guests who will be speaking, one on Friday, one on Saturday. Dr. Hannah Gunn is going to be talking about power and agency online. And that will be in the library in room 307 at 5:30. So if you can come, please do. There will be food, by the way. Free food. You know how that works, right? It's being catered by APU, so I don't know what that means. Muktuk? No, that was a joke. Probably a poor one. However, that was remember, I'm not awake yet, so I can make jokes that are really poor when I'm not awake. I did have a cup of coffee, but I don't know where I left it. It's one of those things. Saturday, Dr. Celia Zamora, I don't know how to pronounce that other name, will be speaking from 12 to 1:30 p.m. in the Science Building, room 120. I believe there's going to be food there too, probably leftovers from the day before. No, catered by the same group. Coffee and breakfast, it looks like, but there are earlier activities. On the 31st, we start at 9:30, and it goes to 4. and on Saturday from 5:30 to 7. Wait a minute, but there's other things. We have student papers going on, etc. So if you're interested in this, I could forward it to you. I could forward it to the class. But I wanted to point it out. We have that undergraduate conference every year. We've had it since the department began offering a Bachelor of Arts degree. So it's not just a place for us to spend money, to invite people from the lower 48, which, that's not in Alaska, to come up here and give lectures and see Alaska. That's one of the neatest things. They come up here and they've always wanted to come to Alaska, and then they get up here and then we get to take them around and stuff. So that's fun. Sometimes they bring their families. It's kind of fun too. So that's happening this weekend. I haven't asked anyone if they wanted to present or do a paper, because usually the papers come from our more senior level classes. So that's so there you go. Okay. Leave it at that. Okay. So we were talking about Leibniz last class, over a week ago, because of our wonderful holiday. I hope you guys had a nice spring break. Etc. However, I hope nobody caught colds or anything. I haven't. I'm just waking up. That's my problem. Part of my waking up process this morning was driving very slowly behind a bunch of plows. So that was my choice. I saw them ahead of me and I said, I'll just follow them. That was dumb. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to cover in talking about Leibniz, I think I showed you the we went to the lecture notes that I have. We talked about his overall philosophy, the doctrine of monads. A monad is simply a one. So Greek is atom, but in Latin it's monad. So they're ones. So the doctrine of the monads, and he has pre-established harmony associated with this. I did mention this a little bit, the idea that since God, remember this I think comes from Spinoza, the idea that both modes of existence are in harmony with one another. So even though our brain isn't actually moving our arm or even seeing our arm, I don't know how this works. That's very confusing. No one believes it actually, but remember, keep the theory in mind, how it evolved, right? That there was a harmony between those because God created the whole thing, and it's one great big clock kind of ticking away, and the clock doesn't error at all. As a result, when we look at the universe, everything is in harmony. Everything is all kind of arranged and working perfectly. So it's pre-established harmony. The law of continuity, everything keeps, continuing, basically. Optimism, he's an optimist. Although remember Voltaire and his critique through Candide was a clear misunderstanding of what I think Leibniz was talking about. He wasn't saying everybody's going to have a happy, healthy, long life. I saw on Sunday Jack Hickle, one of the sons of Wally Hickle. If anybody remembers him? Remember Governor Hickle? No? Well, in any case, he has spent his life as a medical doctor helping people in South Sudan. It's just, and he showed slides of all the villages where he put in clean water wells and things, and built, a clinic and all this aid for the poorest section of the poorest country, of the poorest continent in the world. So you pick the worst place, essentially, and go there and try to help them. And of course, part of the problem for him was USAID has just recently, by the current administration, been defunded. And so all of the activities that he spent his life working on, helping with those people, has been defunded. So it's over. And the concern is what's going to happen to them. Well, that actually still fits Leibniz's philosophy. There's, not a problem with the idea that there's evil in the world. But remember, Leibniz is certainly aware of, ever since Augustine's idea, that the evil is really our perspective on things. It's not something that God has actually done that's evil, so we can't blame it on God. Somehow, it's our fault. Our fault for seeing it as evil. And you might say, well, wait a minute, God did that. And that's a good critique, I think, of Augustine. But a theodicy, the idea of the theodicy is that this whole history of the universe is essentially God's story. Theodicy is like an Odyssey is the trip of Odysseus. Well, this is a theodicy, the trip of God, basically. The existence of God not a problem for him, as it hasn't been for ages, especially since Anselm. The problem of evil, remember, that's how does that get interpreted, and that's already explained since Augustine. And the question of optimism, all of those. Okay, so the next thing then would be the doctrine of monads and how do they work. He is, in contrast with his contemporary Isaac Newton, Sir Isaac Newton, right? Sir Isaac Newton, remember, British, believes in a steady state universe, believes in atoms, basically. But for them, the atoms are like John Locke constructed them, materialism, the idea that they're hard little pieces that can't be broken down. And the way things are created are through the arrangement of those atoms. For Leibniz, the problem is those smallest things can't be the smallest things because theoretically you could cut them in half. If they're physical things, they have dimensions to them, and dimensions can be halved. And so the smallest things can't be physical things, they have to be spiritual things. Now, this is where I love, there's disagreements out there, but if you look at the way he's using spirit, and today we're going to move on to Berkeley as well, and Bishop Berkeley talks the same way. And so when they're talking about spirit, I would say that they're using a precursor language to what we call energy today in physics. Remember my argument about the angels, how they're essentially a vocabulary used, but what the scholars were actually trying to figure out is what are the forces that are in between the universe as a whole and everything that we observe. The idea for the monad is that they are like spiritual beings. And what do you mean by that? Well, they're beings, they exist, but they don't have physical dimensions. Now, the interesting thing is today, Leibniz is considered much more significant than he has been for many years, because the contemporary physicists are realizing that there's a connection between their view of things as quarks and even smaller things like string theory are actually very much similar, or very similar to what he was trying to describe in his monadology. They're simple, devoid of parts, indivisible and indestructible. And I always like to compare this also to the elements by Euclid. In the elements, Euclid, remember, described numbers as without parts, right? What is a unit? A one? It has no parts. A point, essentially, on a line has no parts. And in a macro sense, it's hard to imagine that because everything we can imagine seems to have dimensions. Otherwise, it doesn't seem to exist. On the other hand, mathematically, we don't really have problems with numbers not physically existing in that sense. But he's using almost the same terminology, actually, to talk about the simplest things, the monads. And they're indestructible. They are the only substances existing. Everything consists of these quarks, essentially, right? That would be completely in agreement with our contemporary physicists, actually. And each monad is a microcosm or universe in miniature, a mirror of the entire universe. No one knows what the hell he's talking about. Really? I mean, what does that mean? When you look at a quark, is it like the universe in miniature? I don't know. So that's an interesting puzzle. And God is the uncreated monad. God's a monad too. And by the way, so are you. You're a monad. That's very confusing to me because, of course, our bodies consist of lots of monads, I would imagine. And yet, somehow, he's also assuming that your consciousness is a monad. So, this is very difficult stuff to try to figure out what the heck he's talking about. The uncreated monad, God, mirrors all things clearly and adequately, etc. Pre-established harmony. Every present state of simple substance is a natural consequence of its preceding state. Cause and effect, right? In such a way that its present is always the cause of its future. All things cooperate in the universe, not only because God is the source from whom they all spring, but still more so because God is the end towards which they are all tending, and the perfection which they are all striving to attain. However, no two monads can be exactly alike, because otherwise they would be the same. They would be different. This sounds an awful lot like Spinoza, some of this stuff. There are no breaks in the continuity of nature. This is the great chain of being theory. There's no gaps in everything. Everything is all full, so to speak, between mineral, plant, animal, and man. No two objects, no two events can be entirely similar, for if they were, they would be not two, but one. And there are no true opposites. This is a thing that bugs a lot of people, but it's very typical European thinking today that causes a lot of conflicts if you're not looking